Anticipation reaching a fever pitch this week for the upcoming showdown in Norman, Oklahoma. The Tennessee Volunteers, led by former Oklahoma national champion and legend Josh Heupel, preparing to face the Oklahoma Sooners in what we all know is a contest ridden with storylines. Heupel's return to his alma mater, Oklahoma's first SEC conference game, two undefeated teams, both with college football playoff aspirations. This is ESPN's College Game Day primetime slot on ABC. All eyes on this game Saturday night in Norman. You are listening to the SEC Recap Podcast. I am actually coming at you live this morning. Just because there is a lot of buzz around this game, a lot of search action happening around this game. And I just wanted to get this episode out a little earlier rather than pre-recording, kind of polishing it up, re-releasing. I'm just going to do a live episode, tag it, and get it out there into the ether because I have a lot of things I want to touch on in this game. First of all, however you're listening to this or watching this eventually, this will be out in podcast form. So if you're catching this later in the week, thank you for listening. If you are not on YouTube, jump on over to YouTube and catch this one because I'm going to have some great graphics, stats, and whatnot up on the screen that's just going to make this episode pop. As always, you can follow me on X at SEC Recap. And today, hold on, let me go in and hide my graphic here to start real quick because I want to show this off real quick. This is no slight to Oklahoma fans, but I said on Twitter that I was going to show this bad boy off this week. I am rocking the latest piece of merch here, my Nico Iamaleava t-shirt. You can find this on the Bonfire store, bonfire.com/store/SEC Recap. Got it in this week, and it is awesome. I'm just going to step away from the mic here for a second and show this one off. I love it. I love it. I love it. If you are a Tennessee fan or just a Nico fan out there, head on over to the Bonfire store. Check out these. Guys, it's that nice, soft cotton. It lays super nice across the shoulders and your arms. Fellas out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get those cheap T-shirts. It's a rough cotton. It doesn't lay right on your chest. These fit great, feel great. They're so nice. But I got something over at that store for everybody, including some fun stuff like this one here. The Big Doink Energy tee. Guys, show your love for Big Doinks with the Big Doink Energy t-shirt. Again, it's all that next level apparel, that super premium, soft cotton. All the designs are going to look great. T-shirts are going to feel great. Head on over there and check that out. All right. I'm going to pull in my game day graphic here. Guys, we have number 6, Tennessee, going to number 15, Oklahoma. ESPN College Game Day primetime slot. All the storylines in this game. All of it. Every single one. We're going to talk about them all. This is Josh Heupel's return to Norman. We have been talking about this. It feels like forever, honestly. It feels like we've been talking about this forever and a day. He quarterbacked the Sooners to a national championship in 2000, returns to Norman as the head coach. And I know they're going to do like a tribute to that national championship team. It's probably going to be nice, warm fuzzies, all pre-kickoff. Know that stadium is going to try to make life difficult for him once that game gets underway. Brent Venables, really nice things to say about Tennessee, saying, I don't know that anyone in the country is playing better than Tennessee right now. I tend to agree with him. And Heupel is bringing in a Tennessee team that has been dominant on both sides of the ball. We're going to dive into some stats here. The Vols enter this game with an offense that is completely firing on all cylinders. Not a hitch in the giddy up, averaging almost 640 total yards per game. Virtually unstoppable through the run game and the pass game. The ground game in particular, racking up 336 rushing yards per game. That is more than double Oklahoma's average, 160 yards. And that dominance has translated into 14 rushing touchdowns over just those 3 games, led by Dylan Sampson and Deshaun Bishop. Sampson has accumulated 357 yards, 9 touchdowns on 45 carries, while Bishop stepping into that backup role, 10.1 yards per carry. Tennessee's offensive line has been instrumental in this, right? Allowing just 2 sacks over 3 games, giving Nico Iamaleava a lot of time to make good decisions. Now, this will be Nico's first true road test. That trip to NC State was a neutral site game. There was a lot of red there. There was also a lot of orange. There's going to be a lot more Oklahoma in this stadium than there is Tennessee. I know Tennessee fans travel. This is going to be a true road test. He's got a big arm, ton of talent. He's completed 65 passes. But under pressure, he has room to improve. Okay. He's been pressured on 17 dropbacks through 3 games, completed just 3 of 8 for 35 yards and an interception. That came in the NC State game. So not great under pressure, not great under duress. I know Oklahoma's going to look to get him in some uncomfortable situations and say, okay, if we take away Dylan Sampson in that rushing game, can Nico beat us? Can Nico and those receivers and those tight ends beat us? Now, for Oklahoma, this is going to be a defensive challenge, right? Oklahoma's defense is going to be the toughest that Tennessee has faced all season. Sooners are 9th in EPA per rush. We're going to talk about that more in detail here in just a little bit. They have a really, really stout front 7, all right? Really, really stout front 7. Defensive end, Mason Thomas, coming off a game with 3 tackles for loss. However, they are allowing almost 16 first downs per game, and that's not against great competition. Temple, Houston, Tulane, pretty solid, but that's a G5 team. Compared to Tennessee just allowing 6.7 first downs per game on average. Zach Alley's going to have that same dilemma that every defensive coordinator preparing for Tennessee comes up against. Do you put extra players in that box to try to stop Dylan Sampson in that rushing attack, potentially exposing your secondary, or do you trust your base defense to hold the line? If you're a defense playing Tennessee, you're going to get caught in your base look a lot, and it's because of Tennessee's tempo. We talk about Tennessee's tempo. It keeps defenses on their heels. Really, it's double-edged. It allows Nico to do that quick math. You know, how many players in the box? Are we going to run? Are we going to pass? Okay. But secondly, for the defense, it forces them into that base look and doesn't let you get as many different looks in, right? Doesn't let you disguise as much, especially when you can't sub because the offense is going so fast. Now, they do have 2 really good safeties, Robert Spears-Jennings, Billy Bauman. Been very, very good, ranking among the SEC's best in coverage. They could be pivotal in limiting Tennessee's big play potential. Oklahoma has recovered 6 fumbles over 3 games. Okay. So they have a knack for getting those turnovers, which could disrupt Tennessee's offensive rhythm. But I want to draw your attention to something here on screen. That's one of these defensive metrics that I really, really like, and that's havoc rate. Okay. Havoc rate at or around 30 or higher, especially in the SEC, is where you want to be. That's a defense's overall potential to be disruptive. So to force interceptions, to force turnovers, strip balls. Oklahoma's havoc rate is just 21%. That's not high relative in the SEC. By contrast, Tennessee's havoc rate is 27.9. So Tennessee does not have as many fumbles or interceptions on the year as Oklahoma does. If you just look at that number, You'd think Oklahoma has a super disruptive defense. They actually don't. Some of those fumbles, I think, were gifted to them. Okay. So something to be careful there when you're just interpreting interceptions and fumbles. Were they caused by the defense or were they coughed up by the opposing offense? In this case, a lot of those were gifted. Okay. Third down efficiency, time of possession. Now, Tennessee, as fast as they go, often is not going to be in a position of clock control. However, through 3 games this season, they have been. One critical factor is going to be third down efficiency. Tennessee, I think, leads the SEC right now in 25 third down conversions out of 44 attempts. So that's a testament to their ability to sustain drives and control that tempo. They have not been thrown off of their rhythm. Oklahoma, meanwhile, has converted just 13 out of 42, roughly half of that of Tennessee, which kind of indicates the potential for that offense to stall out a little bit, have those drives disrupted. So let's talk a little bit more in detail about Oklahoma's offensive struggles and the potential there. So on offense, Sooners have been a lot more modest than Tennessee. So just 326 total yards per game. Now, Jackson Arnold, super talented. He's got a lot of potential with his legs. He rushed for 97 yards, 2 touchdowns over Tulane. And that Tulane team is a good team. I think that Tulane team might be better than any team Tennessee has actually faced. I think that Tulane team might actually be better than the NC State team that Tennessee faced. However, he has constantly been under pressure. It's sort of been a rotating cast along that Oklahoma offensive line, which has allowed 9 sacks through 3 games, 42 yards total loss to sacks. Receiving core also hit by injuries. Okay, that makes Arnold's job even more challenging. They do have a good tight end, Bauer Sharp, wide receiver Deion Burke. They need a big game. Okay, Oklahoma really needs to improve on that early down efficiency. They're just 95th in the country in terms of early downs EPA and 94th in third and fourth down success rate. Let me talk about that a little bit more in detail because I've got these stats up on screen here. So I've got offensive PPA, same thing as EPA for Tennessee and Oklahoma here. And then success rate, okay? These two go hand in hand. So success rate, offensive success rate is on first down, your ability to get 5+ yards because you want to put yourself in second and manageable and ultimately third and short if you're not converting, okay? So then on second down, you want to be able to pick up at least 3. So you're putting yourself in third and 2, maybe fourth and 1 if you can't get it. Those are what is considered a successful down offensively. Defensively, on the flip side, which I also have here, is you're trying to prevent that. So offensive success rate, you want that number to trend as high as possible. Defensive success rate, you want that to trend as low as possible. So if you look at Tennessee's offensive success rate, they're at 54.9%. That is really, really, really good. Versus Oklahoma's offensive success rate, just 36%. So that's illustrating that point I just made, right? That ability for Tennessee to sustain momentum and convert versus Oklahoma's tendency to stall out. Conversely, on the defensive side of the ball, Tennessee's defensive success rate below 30%, 29.2. Oklahoma's defensive success rate, 35.1. So Tennessee doing a better job overall of slowing down or stopping opposing offenses. Now, both of these are really good defenses. Oklahoma and Tennessee have really, really solid defenses. We're going to dig into the details there a little bit more here. But let me go back to this. So staying on schedule for Oklahoma's offense is going to be crucial against a Tennessee defense that only allows like 2 third down conversions on average per game and has recorded 21 tackles for loss. Now, key matchups to watch here. Tennessee's receivers versus Oklahoma's secondary. Tennessee's receiver room is dudes. They got dudes, multiple weapons. You got big play threats everywhere. Dante Thornton, he's averaging 24.5 yards depth of target and 6.3 yards per route. Chris Brazzell, Brew McCoy, big guys there. They've combined for 31 targets through 3 games. Oklahoma's corners, Des Malone, Kenai Walker, they've allowed just 5 receptions on 17 targets, but this will be a test for those guys. This will definitively be a test for those guys. The big one that I'll be watching in this game is Oklahoma's offensive line versus Tennessee's defensive front. With 6 different kind of O-line configurations in 3 games, Oklahoma's got to find some stability here to protect Jackson Arnold and establish a run game. They have not been strong in the run game. And Tennessee's defensive front has been really, really good against the run game. Okay. Led by James Pierce. Now, James Pierce is not leading in sacks right now, but he is causing a lot of pressure. He is affecting every play that he is in on. Now, Nico Iamaleava under pressure. Oklahoma, if they can get him under pressure, he might struggle. We talked about that. 3 of 8, 35 yards, 1 INT when pressured. If Oklahoma can disrupt that rhythm, force him into mistakes, create some turnovers, I think that's going to be key, getting the ball back and kind of limiting Tennessee's possessions. It's going to be a battle in the trenches, y'all. It just is. Protecting the quarterback, controlling the line of scrimmage, going to be crucial for both teams. Oklahoma has really struggled in pass pro. They've allowed the 9 sacks, 42 yards. Tennessee's offensive line, though, been really, really solid. Just 2 sacks for 6 yards lost on the season. That defense has been really aggressive. It could spell big trouble. It could spell really big trouble for the Sooners if they don't make adjustments. Some special teams things could play a significant role. Tennessee has been really good in kick return yardage. Those are the types of plays that really flip field position and change the momentum of the game. That's one of Tennessee's maxims, right? Press the kicking game. That's where the breaks are made. They repeat those maxims before every game. You're going to see them do that, I think. They're averaging 22.3 yards per return compared to Oklahoma's 10.3. In a game where field position could be super crucial, a big return could shift that momentum either way. So for Tennessee or Oklahoma. Some tempo and game strategy notes. Both teams favor an up-tempo style, but I think in this matchup, Oklahoma is going to benefit from controlling the clock and limiting possessions for Tennessee just a little bit more. You want to limit Tennessee's offensive explosiveness. Now, you'll see on screen here, I've got that success rate and explosiveness for each offense. These teams are really even in terms of explosive potential and creating points off of explosive plays. That's really what this is measuring, is its EPA after explosive plays, right? So after you create a big play, are you adept at turning that into subsequent points? Both teams are pretty good at that. Tennessee definitely moves the ball more consistently down the field, but both teams capable of scoring off of big plays. Tennessee appears to have the upper hand with that high potency offense and a really, really solid defense. However, Oklahoma, very resilient with that home field advantage, ability to create turnovers. You add an element of unpredictability, something we can't quite capture in any of these metrics we're looking at, okay? So all signs sort of point to Tennessee leveraging this explosiveness on offense, this efficiency on defense to control the game. They are stat leaders in terms of total yards, rushing yards, third down efficiency, time of possession, yet it's a game of momentum and opportunities. If Oklahoma can capitalize on key moments, force some turnovers, disrupt Tennessee's rhythm, they do have a chance to upset the Vols. So before I give my game prediction, guys, I want to dive in just a little bit more and illustrate some of these stats. So we talked about offensive PPA, success rate, explosiveness. Tennessee leads in offensive EPA. They lead in success rate. Explosiveness on both teams is really evenly matched. Tennessee leads in defensive success rate, 29.2% versus 35.1% for Oklahoma. Defensive open field yards allowed. That is also really balanced. Tennessee has allowed 44 yards to opposing offenses in the open field. Oklahoma just allowing 35. On the season, that's a really good average, right? Just 10 to 12 or so, 10 to 15 per game. And a lot of that, these are not excluding garbage time. So a lot of these, especially for Tennessee, have come in garbage time when they've got, backup players in the game. And we talked about havoc rate. Tennessee's defense actually more disruptive than Oklahoma, despite looking at the stat lines, Oklahoma having more fumbles and interceptions on the year. Let's dive in and look at the quarterback matchups with just a bit more granularity. I'm going to share a new tab here. Through 3 weeks, just kind of examining Nico Iamaleava versus Jackson Arnold, because I really think that's what you're going to see in this game. Both young quarterbacks with a lot of potential. Both quarterbacks have made some great plays. Both quarterbacks have also made some plays that show off their youth. So I have this graph here that shows their passing efficiency rating. This does not factor in rushing. Rushing is already accounted for in team rushing. So I'm just factoring in their ability as a passer here, right? So through 3 weeks, you can see both quarterbacks very consistent. Jackson Arnold actually a little bit more consistent, but his ceiling has been capped, I think, due to a lot of limitations with the offensive line and maybe some injuries to the receiving core. Whereas you look at Nico's numbers, Nico's had a little bit more variance, still relatively consistent overall, but a little more variance in his numbers. He's also seen, I think, significantly less playing time, especially last week because they had him out by the second quarter. But his floor, Nico's floor and Nico's ceiling has been much higher due to a more a better offensive line play, and more productivity from the receivers and the tight ends there at Tennessee. To give you an idea of where they've landed in the rankings, let me go back and share this here. So week 1, I had Nico at 5 in the rankings. Jackson Arnold was 12. In week 2, Nico was 6. Jackson Arnold was 14. And then just last week, Nico was 6 again. Jackson Arnold was 15. So Nico hovering around 5, 6, and 6. Jackson Arnold hovering 12, 14, 15. So there you can kind of see again, Nico with a little bit more consistency due to those factors we just mentioned. And Jackson Arnold not inconsistent, but with a ceiling that's been a little more capped. Now, one thing I want to throw out there, again, before I get into my final prediction for this game, is like the strength of schedule. You've heard a lot of talk about the strength of schedule for both teams. Well, Oklahoma's actually played tougher teams, and Tennessee hasn't really played anybody. And I'm actually not going to debate that too much, but I think we're making too much of that debate as a whole. Even if we just look at, something like ESPN's FPI and look at resume projections, right? Oklahoma played Temple, Houston, and Tulane. Okay. So strength of schedule, or let's talk strength of record, I guess. Oklahoma at 23 out of the 134 FBS teams on the year. Whereas Tennessee played Chattanooga, who's an FCS team. They're not included in FPI rankings. Then they played NC State, who at the time was an AP top 25 team, although I think they were overrated in a lot of different ways. And we've subsequently seen that. And then they played Kent State last week, who is definitively the worst team in FBS. Their strength of record is 35. So Oklahoma strength of record 23 versus Tennessee strength of record 35. Sure, you can say that Oklahoma has a better strength of record. They've played slightly tougher teams. But are we really going to debate Kent State versus Temple? Because if I'm not mistaken, yes, Kent State might be the worst team in the FBS. But I'm pretty sure Temple is the second worst team in the FBS. Let's scroll down here, take a look. Yeah, they are. Okay. So I'm not even going to consider these FPI rankings, right? Kent State negative 27.2, Temple negative 20.9. Both Tennessee and Oklahoma handled the worst and second worst teams in the FBS exactly how you should. If you want to compare NC State and Tulane, that's fine. If you want to compare Houston and Chattanooga, that's fine. I'm not really going to get into that. I think both teams have played a largely underwhelming schedule. What I will glean from that is that Tennessee has handled their opponents in every single game, whereas Oklahoma has been far less consistent. And if, for those of you, I see some people jumping in and out of the live stream here. I've got one viewer consistently. Hey, thank you for whoever you are. But if you're going back and watching this, or you're just jumping in the middle here, rewind a little bit, go back and check out those offensive and defensive efficiency metrics where we talk about how much more consistent Tennessee has been versus Oklahoma, who's been a little more inconsistent. One more thing here. This is coming from Sports Reference, just to show a comparison between the offenses, and we'll do some team defenses just on basic stats, right? These are the stats that have a really high correlation with win totals, and you can look these up a lot of places. That's why I don't always like just pop them into graphics and include them. You'll see these all over Twitter. People will say, oh, it's the number 1 offense versus the number 30 defense, and the number, 12 special teams versus the number 40, whatever. Those numbers don't really mean anything. You can't draw conclusions from that, right? Except to say maybe, well, if you're top 10, you're maybe X amount of points margin better than a team that's 25 or less. But if you look at team offense, in terms of scoring, Tennessee ranks first, Oklahoma ranks 50th. If we just look at passing efficiency, so that's going to be average yards per game, Tennessee ranks 23rd, Oklahoma ranks 114th. If we're going to look at rushing efficiency in terms of yards or even average, let's look at rushing average. Tennessee ranks 4th, Oklahoma ranks 73rd. Total offense, Tennessee 5th, Oklahoma 114. Okay. The point is, Tennessee is a top 5 team in virtually every offensive metric. And Oklahoma is ranking like at best 70 or below. They're kind of in that bottom half or bottom third. I'm going to switch over and look at team defense too, because I think this matchup is going to show a little bit better what a lot of people are talking about. And that has been Oklahoma's defense being really, really good. This will be the best defense that Tennessee has faced, okay? So in terms of scoring defense, Tennessee still ranks 3rd. Oklahoma ranks 24th. If you want to adjust for level of opponent, you go right ahead. I'm not going to bother, considering I don't think either of these teams have really played a super whelming schedule of opponents, okay? In terms of passing defense, Tennessee ranks 5th. Oklahoma ranks 58th. I think a lot of this that you're seeing from Tennessee, though, comes off the backs of that defensive line, just causing a lot of pressure. So Tennessee's secondary really hasn't been tested. I think Tennessee's secondary will be tested a good bit more in this game. I expect Oklahoma to get points. I do. I expect both of these teams to get points. I'm going to hold off on my prediction just yet. But I do think both of these teams will be able to score. Okay. If we look at rushing average defense, okay, Tennessee ranks 4th, Oklahoma just outside the top 10. They rank at 11. Total average yards surrendered to opposing offenses per game, Tennessee ranks 2nd overall. Oklahoma, 26. So again, even when we compare defensive metrics, just these basic stats that have a high correlation with win totals, Tennessee is still ranking like in the top 10, top 5, and Oklahoma is hovering more around that like top 10, top 15, top 25. Okay. So these still kind of favor Tennessee a little bit. Now, the advantage Oklahoma has, of course, is that Oklahoma is playing at home. So I want to draw your attention to one final thing here. And this is a graphic that I post every Sunday after the numbers update. And this is SEC team EPA. And I normally do this weekly, but I ran a graph that's going to show you the season average for every team. And then I'm going to draw your attention back to something else just to kind of illustrate a point here as I start to close out and get into the prediction. The dotted blue line and the dotted red line are conference averages. Okay. That's the average defensive EPA and average offensive EPA. Offense is along the x-axis here, defense along the y. You want defense to trend negative, so down, and you want offense to trend positive, so to the right. So the quadrant 1, kind of the best teams will tend to appear in this bottom right quadrant here. The worst teams will tend to appear in the top left. Now, weekly will tell a slightly different story, okay? But that's why I wanted to run a season average to show you what we're looking at on the season. And what I'm going to draw your attention to here is this kind of grouping of 6 teams, really 4 teams. But if we go over and draw a little, continue that circle around Georgia and Missouri, this grouping of 6 teams right here that tends to stand out, particularly in terms of defensive EPA. Again, you want that to trend negative. But particularly these 3 here in terms of offensive EPA as well. That'd be Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, in kind of that elite grouping, and then Texas, Georgia, Mizzou in that second tier grouping. All of these teams, though, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, Mizzou. I know Georgia and Mizzou are just outside of that offensive average, but those are skewed by their most recent game versus Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee. They've had a more favorable schedule too. So non-opponent adjusted, they're going to appear a little higher here. Arkansas and Oklahoma are appearing kind of on the boundary of quadrant 1 with some outsized week 1 performances. So these 6 teams here, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, Mizzou. If you look at SEC conference rankings, and I'm just going to use FPI to make this simple. You look at your top 6 teams, excuse me. They are Texas, Alabama, Tennessee. Let me share that tab. Sorry. Forgot I wasn't shared. Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Ole Miss, Mizzou. Offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency, your best teams, your elite teams, okay, are always going to outperform in that field position battle. The ability of the offense to have a high success rate on downs and a high EPA per play. Okay. Are you converting drives into points? Same thing for the defenses. Are they limiting opposing offenses? And all 6 of these teams do that at a really, really high level, borderline elite level. If we look at Oklahoma here, this is where you see the biggest difference. If we want to look at FPI, Oklahoma's right at that 7th team. You say, well, Oklahoma's right there. They're just on the outside of that, elite tier. If we look at the EPA chart, they're not really. They're kind of close defensively, and that's the metric that everybody's been talking about is Oklahoma's defense. But they're right at the conference average. Kentucky's also at the conference average. South Carolina's at the conference average. Texas A&M is right at the conference average. Arkansas is at the conference average. Auburn's at the conference average. All of those teams have at least 1 loss. Oklahoma is the only team that's undefeated that is still hovering right around the conference defensive average in terms of EPA per play. They're not even close to the offensive average. That is going to be the biggest factor in this game. I get the vibe that this game is going to go the way that the Tennessee-NC State game went. Maybe a little closer, longer into the game. I have Tennessee as an 8.5 point favorite. The Vegas line, I think, is -7 last I looked. I'm even seeing some point margins as being close to 2 touchdowns in favor of Tennessee. I do not think that that's bait. I think that that is a forecast. I think Vegas is actually being conservative, just like they were being conservative in that NC State game. And that NC State line got up to like 13, 14. We can talk about EPA. We can talk about defensive personnel. We can talk about these matchups. But I want to end by talking about the game flow. What we saw happen in the Tennessee-NC State game was that Tennessee defensive front never really gave that NC State offense anything. 27 total yards of offense in the second half. I just think this Tennessee defensive front is going to wear down the rotating cast of Oklahoma's offensive line enough into the third and fourth quarter that Jackson Arnold is not going to be able to put the team on his back like he needs to be able to do in this game. I think Oklahoma will be able to slow down and disrupt Tennessee's offensive rhythm. I don't expect this game to be like a high 50s game for Tennessee. I do think this is a game that Tennessee can score into the 40s. And believe me, if Josh Heupel can hang 50 in this game, he's going to hang 50 in this game. I just don't see Oklahoma's offense being able to keep up like that, not without some crazy breaks, maybe in special teams or turnovers. I see Oklahoma maybe cracking like that 17-20 mark. And this still ends up being like a 20, potentially even a 3-score ball game. Now, if you're an Oklahoma fan tuning in, I know I'm sporting a Tennessee shirt. I'm trying to give Oklahoma a fair break here, but when I look at all of the metrics, I just don't see this. I don't see this game going Oklahoma's way in the end. I see Tennessee winning this one. I would pick Tennessee to cover that 8.5-point spread. I think this does end up more like a 12-point game, at least. Like I said, with the potential to go up 3 scores. And that's the Josh Heupel factor, right? Josh Heupel kind of, knowing the history there, if he can hang 40 or 50, he's going to hang 40 or 50. So I'd maybe take the over in this game, not the under, despite the defenses. Maybe I'm the odd man out there, just because I still like Tennessee's scoring potential. Again, it's that NC State game flow. I don't know that Oklahoma's offensive line is going to hold up late into the fourth quarter against this Tennessee defensive front. Even if Oklahoma hits Tennessee early, maybe they're up 10-6 or 10-7 in the first quarter, or they've played them super close and it's an ugly 10-7 Oklahoma lead at the half. That Tennessee defense is super deep. They're going to rotate. They're going to grind. I just don't think Oklahoma's offense is going to be able to withstand that. So I like Tennessee to start to pull away in this game by the third, by the fourth quarter, and we see that lead really get stretched. So my pick in this one, I think Tennessee rolls into Norman. I think the Vols come away with a ranked road SEC win. They shake Oklahoma's hand at the end. They say, welcome to the SEC. But this night was not your night. Oklahoma still has a lot to play for in the season. I just don't think that this is their game. I think this game sets Tennessee up to be in perfect position for a potential 11-1 college football playoff run. You win at Oklahoma if you're Tennessee. You can split Alabama at home, Georgia on the road. You're 11-1 competing for the college football playoff and the 12-team playoff. You lose this game, I think you can still split Alabama, Georgia, but then that Alabama game becomes a must-win. I like Tennessee on the road here. I know I'm a Tennessee homer, but I try to give everybody a fair shake. I do think Oklahoma is a really solid team. They're a really, really good top 15 team. But I see Tennessee as a top 5 team. And that talent disparity of a top 5 versus a top 15, we're going to see on display in Norman Saturday night. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know your score prediction. Drop it in the comments. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you hate me? Do you love me? I don't care. Just smash that like, smash the thumbs up. Head on over to the Bonfire store. Check out all the great merch, my SEC Pride merch, and more there at the Bonfire store. And if you say something mean on the channel, I don't care. Just go buy a t-shirt and make up for it. Follow me on Twitter at SEC Recap. Hope you enjoyed this preview. I will be back. I will preview the Florida, Mississippi State. We got Mizzou, Vandy. We got Arkansas, Auburn to cover as well. So check out those videos. I will catch you guys later. Have a great weekend.